Welcome to Concept in Medicine. In today's tutorial, we are going to be looking at the coagulation cascade. Alright, the coagulation cascade is also referred to as the secondary hemostasis. So with that, let's talk about hemostasis. When we say hemostasis, the word hemostasis is coming from hemo and stasis. Hemo means blood, stasis means to stop. So when we say hemostasis, it involves processes which help in the stoppage or arrest of blood flow and also prevent blood flow. That is what they call hemostasis. For the hemostasis, there are two types. We have the primary hemostasis and the secondary hemostasis. For the primary hemostasis, it involves the production of an unstable platelet plaque at the site of the injury. This may also involve local substances like collagen and von Willebrand factor, which is contained in the endothelial tissues. For the secondary hemostasis, it involves a stepwise series of enzymatic reaction resulting in the production of a cross-linked or stable fibrin clot, and also creating adequate time for the repair of tissues. Now let's talk about the coagulation cascade, which is the secondary hemostasis. The coagulation cascade is made up of three pathways. We can talk about the intrinsic pathway, and we can also talk about the extrinsic pathway, and finally the common pathway. Let's talk about the intrinsic pathway. So looking at the intrinsic pathway is also known as the contact activation pathway. It means that when there is a damage to the surface, these substances, that is kallikrein, collagen, and high molecular weight kininogen will be exposed. And once they are exposed, they will cause the activation of factor 12, which is also referred to as the Hickman factor or the contact or glass factor. Upon contact, yes, this factor 12 becomes activated. Anywhere you see A, know that that is activation. It tells you that the clotting factors or the coagulation factors, you should know that the coagulation factors belong to a family known as the serine protease. The serine protease. And for the coagulation factors, they are going to be in their inactivated form, their inactive form, referred to as the zymogen or proenzyme. When these proteins are exposed, that's the kallikrein, collagen, and kininogen, that's high molecular kininogen, they cause the activation of factor 12. That is the Hickman factor or the contact or glass factor, and that becomes known as factor 12A, meaning it has become activated. Activated factor 12 causes the activation of factor 11, meaning you are going to have inactive factor 11 becoming active factor 11. And factor 11, we know that it is also referred to as a plasma thromboplastin antecedent. Activated factor 11 binds to calcium, and together they activate factor 9. So we have factor 9 becoming activated. From there, activated factor 9 together with calcium ions and also activated factor 8. Factor 8 is going to go through activation when thrombin, which is circulating, activate it in a feedback mechanism process. So in that, we are going to have activated factor 9 plus activated factor 8 and calcium together activating factor 10. So you have factor 10 becoming activated factor 10. And that is where the common pathway will begin from. And this is where the intrinsic pathway ends, meaning activated factor 9 reacting with calcium and activated factor 8. Then together activating factor 10. So this is where the common pathway starts from. Let's talk about the extrinsic or tissue factor pathway. For that, we will say that damage to the endothelial tissue causes the activation of factor 3. That's why we are having factor 3 becoming activated factor 3. And at the same time, through cross-link reactions, activate factor 7. So we have factor 7 becoming activated factor 7. Either activated factor 3 or activated factor 7 will then react with calcium to cause the activation of factor 10. So we are going to have factor 10 becoming activated factor 10. And that is where the common pathway is going to begin. Because both intrinsic and the extrinsic pathway and the extrinsic pathway meet at a point. They join together to give us a common pathway. So this is where the common pathway is going to start from. So in that case, we will say that the activated factor 10 together with calcium and activated factor 5, and these three, we refer to them as prothrombinase complex. That is activated factor 10, activated factor 5, and calcium together will form a complex we call prothrombinase complex. Alright, so this prothrombinase complex, that's activated factor 10, activated factor 5, and calcium, causes the conversion of factor 2 to what? Activated factor 2. That becomes prothrombin going into thrombin. Then when we have the thrombin, that is activated factor 2, which is mostly in circulation, it will cause the conversion of factor 1, that is fibrinogen, into activated factor 1, that is fibrin. And when the fibrin is formed, it is not yet stable. So what do you need? The activated factor 1, that's fibrin, reacts with calcium and activated factor 13, that is the fibrin stabilizing factor, what we call the fibrinase, to form a cross-linked or stable fibrin clot. And that is where the coagulation cascade will end. Now looking at factor 8 becoming activated factor 8, factor 5 becoming activated factor 5, and factor 13 becoming activated factor 13, these reactions are catalyzed by thrombin, which is normally in circulation and acts based on feedback mechanism, meaning that if the levels of factor 8, 5, and 13 are decreasing, there will be a positive feedback for their inactive form, that is the proenzyme or the zymogen, to become activated to give us an active enzyme or an activated protein. So simply put, if you watch this very carefully, we can say that the common pathway would have factors such as factor 10, 5, 2, 1, and 13. To easily remember this, if you multiply 1 by 2 by 5, you will get 10. And in addition to that, we have factor 13, which is the fibrin stabilizing factor, coming in. So for the common pathway, the factors involved, we have factor 10, 5, 2, 1, and 13. What of the extrinsic pathway? Simply put, to get to 10, you will need a sum. And what is that sum? That sum is going to be 3 plus 7, which will give us 10. So for the extrinsic pathway, you have factor 3 and factor 7 contributing to that pathway. And then once again, for the common pathway, you have factor 10, 5, 2, 1, and finally factor 13. To easily remember the first four factors, remember 1 by 2 by 5 will give you 10. So you have 1, 2, 5, 10. That will give us 10, 5, 2, 1, and 13. To add factor 2, 7, 9, 10 are referred to as the vitamin K dependent factors. Once again, why? Because their function is dependent on the vitamin K dependent gamma carboxylation process. That makes them the vitamin K dependent factors. Then finally, let's talk about some bleeding disorders associated with deficiencies of the coagulation factors. So a deficiency of factor 8 is referred to as hemophilia A, which is the most common type of hemophilia. Deficiency of factor 9 is referred to as hemophilia B, also known as Christmas disease, the second most common type of hemophilia. Deficiency of factor 11 will give rise to hemophilia C, and deficiency of von Willebrand factor will give rise to von Willebrand disease. And we said that the von Willebrand factor is also known as the factor 8 related antigen, meaning that it's a factor 8 binding protein. It's a complex glycoprotein produced exclusively in the endothelium and the megakaryocytes. I believe we have made a lot of understanding out of the coagulation cascade. Kindly make sure to subscribe to my channel, like, share, and also don't forget to comment the next concept you would like to see on my channel. Kindly ensure to leave your notification bell on to receive first-hand updates about my video uploads. My name is Dr. Del, and this is Concept in Medicine. Bye-bye.